A routine forest patrol took a shocking turn when a police canine froze in his tracks, fixated on a moss-covered rock. Then, without warning, he erupted, barking, howling, scratching at the earth with a desperation his handler had never seen before. The officers tried to pull him back, but the dog refused, his cries echoing through the trees like a warning. Something was buried there, something alive. When the truth was finally uncovered, hardened men who had seen everything stood in stunned silence. What lay beneath that rock would move not only them, but an entire community, to tears. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy, scattering patches of golden light across the forest floor. Officer Daniel walked steadily along the narrow path, his radio clipped to his shoulder, but it was his four-legged partner who led the way. Rex, his loyal German shepherd, sniffed the air with practiced precision, his ears flicking at every rustle of leaves. To most people, it was just another quiet stretch of woods. To Rex, it was alive with hidden scents, stories, and warnings. Daniel trusted Rex more than anyone else on patrol. They had worked together for years, tracking suspects, searching for missing persons, even uncovering evidence no human eye could ever find. To Daniel, Rex wasn't just a partner. He was family. Every mission started with the same ritual. Daniel's steady pat on Rex's back and a simple phrase, "Let's do this, buddy." That morning felt ordinary at first. The forest was calm, save for the chirping of birds and the distant rush of a stream. Daniel noted the silence, comforted by its familiarity. Yet Rex's behavior seemed different, subtly, almost imperceptibly so. His gait was more alert, his nose twitching with unusual urgency. Daniel slowed, watching him closely. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, though Rex didn't pause to listen. The dog's muscles were taut, his tail stiff, his movements sharper with each step. They continued deeper, the sound of crunching leaves underfoot filling the air. Daniel's eyes swept the ground for signs of hikers or trespassers, but there was nothing. No footprints, no discarded bottles, no evidence of recent activity. Still, Rex's posture told another story. Something here was different. Something hidden. Daniel adjusted the grip on his radio, his instincts sharpening. Years on the force had taught him one thing. When Rex acted like this, it was never without reason. The shepherd paused suddenly, his body rigid. His ears pricked forward, his head turning slightly as if he had caught a signal only he could understand. Daniel froze behind him, his own senses heightened. For a long, tense moment, the forest felt like it was holding its breath. Then Rex's nose dropped to the ground, and his pace quickened, leading Daniel straight toward the heart of a mystery neither of them yet understood. Rex's sudden shift in energy was impossible to ignore. One moment he was moving steadily along the trail, the next he froze, ears stiff, nostrils flaring as though he had caught a scent too strong to dismiss. His head whipped left, then right before locking on something deeper in the woods. "Easy, boy," Daniel murmured, loosening his grip on the leash but staying cautious. He had seen this before, the moment when Rex transitioned from casual patrol to full alert. It usually meant drugs stashed in an abandoned car, or a missing hiker's trail left behind. But here, in the silence of the forest, it felt different. Without warning, Rex lunged forward. His muscles bunched, straining against the leash, dragging Daniel off the beaten path and into thicker brush. "Rex, hold up!" Daniel hissed, stumbling slightly as branches whipped against his uniform. But the shepherd wouldn't stop. His barking erupted suddenly, sharp and urgent, echoing through the trees like an alarm. Daniel's heart kicked up a notch. He tightened his hold, forcing his pace to match the dog's frantic pulling. "What is it? What do you smell?" His words were steady, but tension threaded through every syllable. Rex led him toward a cluster of tall pines where the ground sloped unevenly. There, half hidden among the fallen needles and damp leaves, sat a massive boulder blanketed in moss. To anyone else, it was just part of the forest's natural landscape. But to Rex, it was something more. The shepherd stopped short of the rock, his barking intensifying. His paws scraped against the earth as he lunged forward, nails digging furrows into the soil. He circled the boulder, barking nonstop, his growls weaving between the frantic yelps. Daniel frowned, stepping closer. "A rock?" he muttered under his breath, baffled. Rex had signaled drugs inside cars, hidden cash in walls, even human remains once, but never a rock in the middle of nowhere. Yet there was no mistaking the dog's body language. His hackles were raised, his tail stiff, every fiber of his being trained on that moss-covered stone. Daniel's hand hovered over his radio, the forest suddenly feeling heavier, darker. He had learned long ago to trust Rex's instincts above all else. Something was beneath that rock, and judging by Rex's relentless barking, it wasn't something either of them would forget. Rex's bark shattered the calm of the forest. It wasn't the sharp warning bark Daniel had heard countless times on patrol. It was raw, desperate, unrelenting. Each sound echoed through the trees, bouncing off the trunks until it felt as though the woods themselves were vibrating with urgency. Daniel tightened his grip on the leash, his voice firm. "Rex, heel." But the shepherd ignored him, lunging again toward the moss-covered rock, his claws tearing at the earth with frantic determination. Bits of soil and pine needles flew behind him as he dug, his throat straining with the force of his cries. Sweat broke across Daniel's forehead. In all their years together, he had never seen Rex like this. The dog was trained to obey commands instantly, no matter the situation. But now it was as if instinct had completely overtaken training. Whatever was beneath that rock, Rex wasn't about to leave it hidden. Daniel reached for his radio, pressing the button with urgency. "Unit 23 to base. I've got a possible alert from K9, location, Northern Forest Sector near Pine Hollow, requesting backup." His voice was steady, but his pulse raced in his ears. Rex barked louder, his body pressed low to the ground as if he were trying to wedge himself beneath the stone. His nails scraped across the rock's surface, leaving faint marks against the moss. A growl rumbled deep in his chest, not directed at Daniel, but at whatever lay buried beneath. Minutes stretched like hours until the crunch of boots on dry leaves signaled the arrival of 2 more officers. They slowed as they drew near, their eyes flicking from Daniel to the frenzied dog. "What's going on?" one of them asked, keeping his voice low. Daniel shook his head, pointing to the boulder. "He won't stop. I've tried commands, I've tried pulling him back. He's locked onto this rock like something's alive under it." The younger officer frowned. "A rock? You sure it's not a false signal?" Daniel shot him a sharp look. "Rex doesn't give false signals. If he's this insistent, something's there." As if to punctuate his handler's words, Rex let out a howl so piercing it sent shivers down the men's spines. He pawed furiously at the ground, dirt caking his nails, his fur bristling with intensity. The senior officer exhaled slowly. "Whatever it is, he's not letting this go." Daniel nodded grimly. "Then we find out what he's trying to tell us." Rex barked again, louder, sharper, almost pleading, and in that moment, every man present felt it in their bones. Beneath that rock lay something more than just dirt and roots. Something hidden, something important, something that would soon bring them all to their knees. The forest echoed with Rex's relentless barking, a sound that carried urgency and desperation. Daniel crouched low, his eyes scanning the moss-covered boulder as if it might suddenly reveal its secret. The rock looked ordinary. Just another piece of the woodland, its surface damp with moss, its edges softened by years of weather. But Rex's behavior told a different story. One of the backup officers, a tall man named Collins, shook his head. "It's just a rock, Dan. Maybe he caught the scent of a rabbit or something that passed through here." Daniel's jaw tightened. Rabbits don't make him act like this. The third officer, Ramirez, knelt beside the stone, brushing at the soil with his gloved hand. "The ground looks disturbed," he murmured, "like it was moved recently." Daniel leaned closer. Ramirez was right. The soil around the base of the rock was looser than the rest of the forest floor. It was as if someone, or something, had shifted it. Rex clawed furiously at the dirt, ignoring Daniel's firm command to stop. His growls deepened, punctuated by sharp, frantic barks. His muscles quivered with urgency and his eyes burned with determination. Collins frowned, still skeptical. "You're telling me there's something under this? It's a rock the size of a car. How could anyone even move it?" Daniel straightened, gripping the leash tightly. "I don't know. But I've trusted Rex too many times to start doubting him now. He's never been wrong. Ramirez pressed his hand against the stone, testing it. To his surprise, the boulder shifted, barely, but enough to prove it wasn't anchored as deeply as it looked. He pulled back, his expression hardening. He's right, it moves. Collins raised his brows. So what are you thinking? Drugs? A stash? Maybe someone hiding evidence out here? Daniel shook his head slowly, watching Rex claw at the dirt until his paws bled. No, this isn't drugs. Look at him. He's not just alerting, he's begging. Whatever's under there, it's alive. The words hung in the air like a chilling echo. Collins exhaled, his skepticism fading as he glanced at the dog. All right. What's the plan? Daniel pulled the radio from his shoulder. We need tools. Shovels, pry bars, whatever we can get. This rock's coming up. As he called for backup, Ramirez kept brushing dirt away from the base. His gloves came back damp, the smell of rot faint in the air. He froze, glancing up at the others. There's something here, something buried. Rex barked furiously, his paws scraping faster, his body trembling with desperation. His cries weren't just commands, they were pleas. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He had learned to trust his partner's instincts without question, but the intensity in Rex's eyes unsettled him. It wasn't just urgency, it was sorrow. He crouched low, placing a steady hand on Rex's back. All right, buddy, he said softly, though his own voice trembled. We'll find out, we'll see what's under there. The shepherd gave one last desperate bark, his chest heaving, his gaze fixed on the moss-covered stone. And in that moment, every man present understood. Whatever lay beneath the rock, it wasn't going to be easy to face. The boulder loomed in front of them, moss clinging thickly to its damp surface. To the untrained eye, it was simply part of the forest's natural landscape, but under the scrutiny of 3 seasoned officers and a frantic K9, it began to feel like something else entirely. Ramirez crouched again, running his gloved fingers along the edges. Look at this, he murmured. The moss here's thinner, almost scraped away, like someone's been touching or shifting it. Daniel knelt beside him, his eyes narrowing. The soil was looser near the base, darker and moist, as if it had been disturbed not long ago. The rest of the ground was firm, compact, undisturbed by weather. This patch told a different story. Rex pawed and barked wildly, his nails clattering against the stone. His body quivered with raw insistence, every fiber of him screaming that the answer lay just beneath. Collins shifted uneasily, his flashlight beam dancing across the rock. I don't like this, he muttered. It feels off, like it's hiding something that was never meant to be found. Daniel didn't answer. His hand pressed against the cold, damp surface, and to his surprise, he felt a faint give. The rock wasn't as firmly set as it appeared. Someone had placed it here, purposefully covering whatever lay beneath. Ramirez's eyes darkened as the faint smell of rot drifted upward with the damp air. It wasn't overpowering, but enough to make his stomach twist. You smell that? He asked quietly. Collins wrinkled his nose. Yeah, that's not just dirt. Rex barked again, louder this time, and threw his weight against the ground as though he could dig through the stone itself. His growl turned into a mournful whine, his nails bloody from the effort. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen Rex track drugs, missing people, even corpses before, but never like this. This was something more primal, more urgent. He rose to his feet, his voice steady but grim. This rock's not natural. Someone wanted whatever's under it hidden, and Rex isn't going to stop until we know what it is. The forest fell silent around them, the kind of silence that seemed to hold its breath, every eye fixed on the mossy stone. And in that moment, it no longer looked like part of the earth. It looked like a grave. Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes locked on the mossy stone. Every instinct told him this was no ordinary find. Rex's relentless barking, the disturbed earth, the faint smell in the air, it all pointed to one truth. Something was buried beneath. Ramirez, Collins, Daniel ordered, His voice clipped with urgency. "We're moving this thing. Grab the shovels from the truck." The two officers exchanged uneasy looks, but didn't argue. Minutes later, they returned with tools, the metallic clang echoing through the quiet forest. Rex never paused. He barked, scratched, and whined as though begging them to hurry. His nails were worn and raw, but his determination didn't falter. "Easy, boy," Daniel whispered, tugging him back gently. "We're getting there." Collins wedged the shovel under one edge of the rock, straining as he pushed down. The boulder shifted slightly, grating against the soil with a low groan. Ramirez joined him, their combined effort moving it just enough to loosen more earth. The ground gave way in patches, and Rex lunged again, his paws tearing at the exposed dirt. He dug frantically, ignoring the officers' shouts to stand back. His growls mixed with sharp whines as though he were both furious and heartbroken at once. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen Rex fearless in the face of criminals, calm during gunfire, precise in every mission. But this was different. This wasn't duty. It was desperation. "Careful," Ramirez muttered, his voice strained as he heaved against the shovel. "Whatever's under here, it's close." The rock shifted further, tilting slightly to one side. A gust of damp air rose from the opening, carrying with it a stronger odor. Faint, but enough to make Collins gag. "That's not just dirt," he said hoarsely. Rex howled, pawing harder, his body half buried in the loosened soil. His tail thrashed wildly, every movement screaming urgency. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears. He dropped to his knees beside his partner, clawing at the dirt with his bare hands. "All right, boy," he whispered, his throat tight. Show me what you found." The officers dug faster, now the scrape of metal against soil blending with Rex's furious efforts. Dirt flew in every direction, clinging to their uniforms, their gloves, their faces. The hole widened inch by inch, the darkness beneath the rock growing deeper, more ominous. Then Ramirez's shovel hit something soft. He froze, his face pale. "Wait," he whispered. "That's not stone." Rex let out a mournful cry, shoving his nose into the hole, his body trembling with an urgency that chilled every man present. The air grew heavier, the silence of the forest pressing in as the reality settled over them. Whatever they had uncovered, it wasn't an object, it was life. The officers dug furiously, soil flying beneath their shovels, but soon they realized the earth wasn't yielding as easily as before. What had started as loose dirt now gave way to a harder, compacted layer, as if someone had intentionally packed it down to keep whatever was hidden from ever being found. Collins grunted, slamming his shovel down again. "It's like concrete. This isn't natural." Ramirez leaned on his handle, his face slick with sweat. "Somebody buried this on purpose. They didn't want anyone or anything getting through." Rex growled, his paws raking at the stubborn ground with raw determination. His nails scraped against the hardened soil, sending small sparks of dirt flying, but he refused to stop. His cries shifted from sharp barks to desperate whines, his entire body trembling as if he knew time was running out. Daniel dropped beside him, clawing at the earth with his bare hands. The dirt was cold and clumped together, sticking under his fingernails. He ignored the sting, his chest tightening with dread. "We're close," he muttered, glancing at Rex, whose amber eyes burned with urgency. "I can feel it." Collins struck his shovel again, the sound dull against the compact soil. "Why bury something this deep? Why go to this much effort?" Daniel didn't answer. His heart told him what his mind refused to say. Someone had hidden something here, and not for innocent reasons. The resistance only fueled Rex's frenzy. He barked furiously, then shoved his muzzle into the half-dug hole, throwing dirt back with frantic kicks of his hind legs. His growls reverberated through the forest, echoing like thunder in the still air. Ramirez's shovel finally broke through a small patch of softer ground. A hollow sound rang out, different, chilling. He froze, staring wide-eyed at Daniel. "Did you hear that?" Daniel nodded, his pulse quickening. "Yeah, we're hitting something." Rex let out a howl so piercing it silenced the forest around them. He lunged back into the hole, his body shaking violently with emotion. The ground had resisted them for as long as it could. Whatever lay beneath was about to be revealed. The officers worked in tense silence. the scrape of metal against hardened soil mixing with Rex's frantic barking. Every shovelful brought them closer. Every strike felt like peeling back a layer of secrets someone had fought desperately to hide. The air grew heavier, the earthy scent of dirt now laced with something sharper, something foul. Collins wiped his brow with his sleeve. I swear, if this turns out to be nothing... His voice faltered as his shovel struck something different, something that didn't sound like soil or stone. A hollow thunk echoed through the pit, sending a chill down his spine. Rex froze mid-bark, his ears snapping forward. He growled low, the hair along his back bristling. Then with a sharp bark, he lunged forward, digging at the exact spot Collins had struck. His nails scraped against the surface and a muffled sound followed, a soft, pitiful whimper. The men froze. Daniel's stomach dropped. "Did you hear that?" His voice was barely more than a whisper. Ramirez's eyes widened. That wasn't the dog, that was something else. Another whimper rose from beneath the earth, weak, muffled, but undeniably alive. Rex let out a howl that shattered the silence, his body surging with renewed desperation. He dug furiously, dirt flying in all directions, his paws raw but unyielding. Daniel yanked at the soil with his hands, his breath ragged. "Hurry!" he shouted. "There's something down here, it's alive!" The officers worked faster, adrenaline driving every motion. Shovels clanged, hands clawed, boots pressed into the ground for leverage. The compacted soil gave way inch by inch until a small cavity began to open. The smell grew stronger now, earth mixed with dampness and the faint, sour scent of decay. But cutting through it was the sound they all clung to. Faint, desperate cries. The unmistakable sound of something fighting to live. Collins's shovel broke through another layer, revealing a patch of fabric buried in the dirt. He froze, his knuckles white around the handle. "Cloth," he muttered hoarsely. Someone wrapped whatever's down here." Daniel's throat tightened as he tore at the soil with his hands, pulling the fabric into view. It was filthy, damp, and clung to a shape beneath it. Rex barked wildly, his tail whipping as though urging them to keep going. Ramirez leaned closer, his breath catching. "There's movement under there," he whispered. "God help us, there's movement." With one final shove, Daniel pulled away the last clump of dirt. A tiny paw pushed weakly through the fabric, trembling, coated in mud. Then came a faint cry, fragile, heartbreaking, and unmistakable. The man's eyes widened, their hearts lurching into their throats. Beneath the rock, beneath the suffocating layers of soil and fabric, lay life, and it was crying out for help. For a moment no one moved. The tiny paw twitching in the dirt seemed unreal, as if the forest itself had conjured it from shadows and echoes. But then another weak cry followed, high-pitched and trembling, and the spell broke. "Dear God," Ramirez whispered, dropping to his knees. "It's alive!" Rex barked frantically, pawing at the hole until Daniel gently pulled him back. "Easy, boy. We've got it now," he said, though his own voice quivered. His hands were already working furiously, scooping away soil, tugging at the filthy cloth with desperate urgency. Collins grabbed the edge of the fabric and pulled, revealing more of the hidden bundle. His stomach twisted as the shape became clear. It wasn't just one small body, but several. "Puppies," Daniel gasped. "It's a litter of puppies." The three men froze in shock, buried alive beneath a rock wrapped in cloth, left to suffocate in the dark. Yet against all odds, faint cries still rose from inside. "Help me," Daniel barked, his composure gone. He clawed at the soil, ripping it away with frantic speed. Collins and Ramirez joined him, their shovels abandoned as they dug with their bare hands, dirt packing under their nails, their hearts pounding in their chests. One by one, tiny bodies came into view. Mud-covered, frail, their fur matted and damp. Some were still, too still, while others twitched weakly, their cries barely audible. Ramirez's throat tightened. Who could do this? His voice cracked as he lifted one trembling pup, brushing soil from its tiny face. Its eyes were sealed shut, its ribs sharp against his palm. It whimpered once, then nestled into his hand as though clinging to life itself. Daniel felt his chest ache as he uncovered another. The pup's breathing was shallow, fragile, as if each gasp might be its last. He cradled it close, whispering, "You're safe now, little one. We've got you." Rex whined, pacing anxiously beside them, his nose pressed into the tiny bodies as if urging them to hurry. His tail lashed, his eyes wide with something Daniel had never seen before, pure grief. Collins pulled free the last of the bundle, laying the cloth open on the ground. There were 5 puppies in total. 2 lay motionless, their tiny forms limp, but 3 still fought, their cries piercing the silence of the forest. Tears blurred Daniel's vision. "We're too late for some," he said hoarsely. "But not for all. Not if we move now." Ramirez nodded, his hands shaking as he wrapped the living pups in his jacket. "We need medics. We need warmth. We need everything we can get." Collins swallowed hard, his usual stoicism shattered. "Someone buried them alive," he said bitterly. "Someone wanted them gone." Daniel looked down at Rex, who had finally quieted. The dog pressed his nose gently against one of the pups, giving the faintest whine. "No," Daniel whispered. "They're not gone. Not yet." The forest held its silence once more, but this time it wasn't eerie. It was heavy with sorrow, and with the fragile sound of life fighting to survive. The forest seemed to blur around them, the towering trees and soft hum of nature fading into the background. All that remained was the circle of men, a desperate dog, and the fragile lives they had uncovered. The small cries pierced through the silence, each whimper cutting deeper than any weapon ever could. Daniel cradled one of the pups against his chest, his gloved hands trembling as he felt the faint, uneven rhythm of its breath. The tiny body was icy cold, fragile as glass, but still alive. He swallowed hard, his vision blurring with tears. "Hang on, little one," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're not alone anymore." Beside him, Ramirez worked frantically to rub warmth into another pup. He stripped off his own jacket, wrapping it snugly around the trembling body. The pup's weak cries softened, its small chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. Ramirez's eyes glistened. "How could anyone do this?" he muttered. "They buried them like trash." Like they didn't matter. Collins stood rigid for a moment, staring down at the lifeless bodies of the 2 who hadn't made it. His jaw clenched, but then his shoulders sagged and he dropped to one knee. He pressed a hand over his mouth, fighting to hold back the sob clawing its way up his throat. "They didn't even have a chance," he whispered hoarsely. "Just babies." Rex whined low, pacing back and forth, his ears pressed flat against his head. He nosed gently at the living pups, then at the still ones. His amber eyes clouded with grief. Finally, he let out a sound none of them had heard before. A deep, mournful howl that rose into the air like a lament. It sent shivers down every spine. Daniel felt his chest tighten. In that cry he heard everything. Rex's sorrow, his desperation, his refusal to let them die forgotten. The shepherd sat back on his haunches, eyes fixed on the tiny bodies, his chest heaving with emotion that no words could capture. Ramirez's voice shook as he spoke. "I've seen a lot on this job, drugs, violence, death, but this—" He shook his head, unable to finish. His hands never stopped moving, rubbing life into the fragile pup in his arms. "This is evil," Daniel nodded, his throat raw. "Rex saved them. If it weren't for him, they'd all be gone by now." He glanced down at his partner, pride mingling with sorrow. He knew their lives still mattered. Collins exhaled shakily, finally reaching down to lift one of the living pups into his own arms. The tiny creature whimpered, nestling weakly against his chest. He blinked back tears, whispering, "Not today. You're not dying today." The men moved with renewed urgency, dividing the pups between them, their jackets and hands becoming makeshift incubators. Every moment counted. Each breath from the pups was fragile, fleeting, but still there. Rex pressed his body close to Daniel's side, his nose brushing against the pup cradled in his handler's arms. His whine was soft now, almost pleading, as if begging Daniel not to let go. Daniel met his gaze. "I won't, buddy. I promise." For a long moment, no one spoke. The forest was silent except for the faint cries of the survivors and the low protective growls rumbling from Rex's chest. The weight of the loss, the 2 who hadn't survived, hung heavy in the air. But so too did the fragile hope of the 3 who still clung to life. Tears slid freely down Daniel's face as he whispered, "We'll get them out. We'll save them, no matter what it takes." And in that clearing, surrounded by sorrow and dirt, grown men who had faced criminals, violence, and death without flinching now found themselves crying, not because they were weak, but because the truth before them was too heavy for any heart to bear. The K9 had done more than his duty. He had forced them to face humanity's cruelty, and in the same breath, given them a chance to fight for innocence worth saving. The urgency of the moment hung heavy in the air. Every second mattered, Every breath from the fragile pups was a ticking clock counting down. Daniel pressed his radio with one hand, still cradling the tiny body in the other. His voice cracked through the static. "Dispatch, this is Unit 23 emergency at Pine Hollow. We've recovered live animals, newborn pups buried alive. We need veterinary assistance immediately. Repeat, immediate. Copy, Unit 23. Nearest vet clinic is on standby. ETA 10 minutes. Hold on, 10 minutes. It felt like forever. Collins pulled off his vest, wrapping it around two of the trembling pups, holding them close to his chest. His lips moved silently, whispering words only they could hear. Stay with me. Don't you dare give up. His tough exterior was gone, replaced by raw desperation. Ramirez, his jacket already wrapped around another pup, pressed the small body against his own warmth. He rubbed gently, murmuring encouragement. You're fighters, I can see it. Just hold on. Help is coming. His hands shook as he worked, but he didn't stop, not even for a second. Rex circled them, whining loudly, his tail stiff, his eyes fixed on the pups as if monitoring every faint breath. He pressed his nose against Daniel's arm, then Collins's chest, then Ramirez's jacket, checking, reassuring himself they were still there, still alive. Daniel crouched lower, his heart hammering. He looked Rex in the eyes. You found them. Now we keep them alive. Do you hear me, boy? The shepherd gave a low, steady whine, almost like an answer, before lying down as close as possible to the pups, his warm body acting like another blanket. His chest rose and fell rapidly, but his eyes never left the fragile lives he had uncovered. Minutes crawled by, each one unbearable. The pups whimpered weakly, their cries fading and returning like flickering lights in the dark. The men adjusted constantly, rubbing harder, shifting jackets, whispering encouragements that sounded more like prayers. Finally, the distant wail of sirens cut through the forest. Relief washed over the officers, though none dared to relax. Over here, Daniel shouted, his voice breaking as the paramedics came running with portable medical kits. A veterinarian knelt beside them, her hands moving quickly, professionally. She took each pup in turn, checking breaths, feeling for heartbeats, warming their frail bodies with special pads. Her eyes were sharp, but her lips pressed tight, betraying the tension of the moment. These three still have a chance, she said firmly. We need to move fast, get them oxygen, fluids. But they're fighters, Rex barked once, sharp and loud, startling everyone. It wasn't aggression, it was insistence, as if to say, don't waste time. Save them. Daniel's chest ached with pride and sorrow. He placed a steady hand on Rex's head, whispering, You've done your job, buddy. Now it's theirs. The paramedics carefully placed the pups into small carriers lined with heated pads. Their faint cries grew just a little stronger, and for the first time since the digging began, hope flickered in the clearing. As the medics rushed toward the ambulance, Rex tried to follow, his leash pulling taut. Daniel held him back gently. Easy, they'll be okay. You saved them. That's what matters, Rex whined, his body tense, his eyes glued to the tiny carriers disappearing into the flashing lights. And for the officers standing in the forest, dirt-stained and tear-streaked, the mission was far from over. Now it was a race against time. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the engine roared to life, sirens wailing into the quiet forest. Inside, the air was thick with tension. 3 tiny lives lay in heated carriers, their weak cries barely audible above the hum of equipment. Every breath they took was shallow, fragile, and terrifyingly uncertain. The veterinarian moved with precision, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. She slipped oxygen masks over the smallest muzzles, adjusted IV drips, and monitored heartbeats that fluttered faintly under her touch. Stay with me, she murmured, her voice gentle but urgent. You've made it this far. Don't give up now. Daniel sat pressed against the wall, his eyes locked on the pups. His heart pounded as though he were in the middle of a high-speed chase, but this was worse. He could fight criminals, face danger, stand his ground, but here, all he could do was watch and pray. His hand rested on Rex's head, grounding himself in the steady warmth of his partner. Rex, however, was anything but calm. The German shepherd whined constantly, his amber eyes darting between the carriers and the vet. Every tiny whimper from the pups made him shift, as though he might leap forward and help himself. Daniel tightened his grip on the harness, whispering, You've done your part, boy. Trust them now. But the dog's trembling body betrayed his refusal to let go. Collins and Ramirez rode in silence, their dirt-stained hands still raw from digging. Collins's tough demeanor had crumbled. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, lips moving in a silent prayer. Ramirez clutched the edge of one carrier, gently stroking the blanket inside, his eyes glistening as if willing the pup to survive. Every bump in the road felt like a threat. Every minute on the clock stretched painfully long. The wail of the sirens grew louder, pressing against their nerves like a relentless reminder that time was slipping away. One of the pups stirred, letting out a stronger cry. All eyes snapped to the carrier, hope flickering through the air like a spark in the dark. The vet smiled faintly. "Good, very good. That's what I need to hear." But another pup lay frighteningly still. The vet's brows furrowed as she adjusted the oxygen, her voice firm but tender. "Come on, little one. Breathe for me. Don't give up now." Daniel's throat tightened, his grip on Rex's harness unyielding. He leaned closer, whispering softly, "Fight, little fighter. Just a little longer." The city lights finally came into view, glowing against the night. Relief surged through the officers as the hospital loomed ahead. The ambulance slowed, its siren still screaming, and the back doors burst open to waiting hands. As the pups were carried into the clinic, Daniel stood frozen for a moment, Rex at his side, their eyes following the fragile lives disappearing into the building. The race wasn't over. It had only just begun. News travels fast, especially when it's the kind that pulls at the heart. By the time dawn broke over the small town, the story of the buried puppies had spread far beyond the forest where they were found. Local reporters gathered outside the veterinary clinic, cameras flashing as they tried to capture any glimpse of the fragile survivors. Headlines raced across screens. Police K9 uncovers heartbreaking secret under rock, and buried alive puppies saved in dramatic rescue. Social media lit up with posts and shares. Thousands of strangers united by the same mixture of anger and hope. Inside the clinic, volunteers arrived with blankets, milk replacers, and tiny bottles. Some brought heating pads, others came simply to sit in the waiting room, their hands clasped in prayer. The weight of the discovery had shaken everyone, the cruelty of it and the miracle that followed. Daniel stepped outside briefly, Rex at his side. The dog's presence drew immediate attention, and people whispered as they saw the German shepherd who had refused to give up. Children pointed with wide eyes, adults wiped away tears, and more than one person murmured, "That dog's a hero." Reporters tried to push forward, microphones extended, but Daniel raised a hand. His voice was steady, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "My partner did what he was trained to do, and more. Without Rex, those puppies would not be here today." He refused to stop. "We simply followed his lead." Rex stood tall, though his amber eyes stayed locked on the clinic doors as if waiting for news. His body was tense, his chest rising and falling quickly. For all the attention, he seemed to care about only one thing: the tiny lives he had saved. Messages poured in from across the region, offers to adopt, donations to cover medical expenses, and countless notes of gratitude. But alongside the compassion came outrage. Who could do something so cruel? People asked again and again. Police promised an investigation, though no suspect had yet been named. Still, for every voice of anger, there were two of hope. The puppies had survived something unimaginable. They had been pulled from the earth itself, carried to safety, and given a second chance. And it was all because a single dog refused to ignore the cries no one else could hear. The community's hearts were breaking, but they were also healing, bound together by the belief that light had triumphed, if only for a moment, over darkness. The clinic's recovery room was small but warm, filled with the soft hum of machines and the quiet rustle of blankets. The 3 surviving puppies lay in tiny incubators, their frail bodies wrapped snugly in cloth, their shallow breaths growing steadier with each passing hour. Daniel stood with his arms crossed, exhaustion etched across his face. Yet despite the weight of the night, he couldn't look away. Every twitch of a paw, every faint whimper felt like a victory. Collins and Ramirez lingered nearby, both silent, their hardened exteriors stripped away. But it was Rex who never moved. The German shepherd sat at the glass of the incubator, his amber eyes fixed on the tiny lives inside. He whined softly when one stirred, wagged his tail gently when another let out a faint cry. The staff smiled at the sight, whispering that the dog seemed more guardian angel than police K9. The veterinarian adjusted the oxygen tube on the weakest pup, her expression finally softening. "They're responding," she said. "Slowly, but they're fighters. The warmth, the fluids, it's working." Relief washed over the room like a tide. Ramirez exhaled deeply, pressing a hand over his face. Collins turned away briefly, his eyes wet. Daniel reached down, resting a steady hand on Rex's back. "You hear that, boy? They're going to make it." Rex let out a low whine, pressing his nose against the glass. His body relaxed slightly, though his eyes never left the fragile pups. Hours passed, and with them came small signs of hope. One pup managed to lift its head weakly, nudging at the edge of the blanket. Another released a louder, clearer cry, a sound that brought tears to everyone's eyes. The smallest, though still weak, twitched and kicked its tiny legs as if testing the world it had almost never known. Volunteers filtered in with supplies, tiny bottles, formula, heating pads. Some whispered words of encouragement. Others simply stood silently, watching the miracle unfold. The atmosphere shifted from sorrow to cautious optimism, each heartbeat inside the incubator a reminder of resilience. Daniel sat down at last, leaning against the wall. He glanced at Rex, who remained rooted to the same spot, and smiled faintly. "You're not leaving them, are you?" The shepherd's ears flicked, but he didn't move. His duty wasn't finished. By evening, the pups were stronger. Their breath steadied, their cries grew louder, their bodies more responsive. The sight stirred something deep in everyone present, the realization that life, once nearly stolen, was fighting back with all its strength. Daniel whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "They survived because one dog refused to give up." Rex gave a soft huff, almost as if he agreed. The room fell quiet again, but this time, it was a peaceful silence, the kind that carries hope. Days turned into weeks, and the story of the buried puppies never left the hearts of those who had witnessed it. Under constant care, the 3 tiny survivors grew stronger. Their eyes opened, revealing curious glimmers of life, and their cries became louder, filled with determination rather than desperation. Every milestone, every wag of a tail, every stumble of tiny paws was celebrated as a victory. Rex was there through it all. The canine who had refused to leave the rock now refused to leave their side. He lay near their pen at the clinic, his head resting on his paws, watching as they wobbled and stumbled through their first steps. The bond between him and the pups was undeniable. When they cried, he whined softly. When they played, his ears perked, and his tail thumped the floor with pride. The community rallied around them too. Donations poured in, not just for the puppies' medical care, but for the shelter itself. Families sent letters. Children drew pictures of Rex as a superhero, and strangers wrote messages thanking him for reminding the world that compassion still existed. One afternoon, the shelter hosted a small ceremony. Officers, volunteers, families, and local reporters gathered to honor Rex. A medal was placed gently around his neck, shining against his dark fur. Daniel patted his partner proudly. "Rex isn't just a police dog," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's a savior. He heard what no one else could, and because of him, lives were spared. He taught us all what it means to never give up." Applause filled the room, but Rex's eyes weren't on the crowd. They were on the puppies, tumbling clumsily in their enclosure, alive and well. As weeks passed, adoption requests poured in. Families eager to give the puppies loving homes came forward, each one touched by the story. Eventually, the shelter carefully selected new families for them. People who understood the value of a second chance. People who promised never to let them suffer again. On the day the adoptions were finalized, Daniel knelt beside Rex. "Looks like your little ones are ready to start their new lives," he murmured, scratching behind his ears. Rex wagged his tail, though his gaze lingered on the pups with unmistakable affection. One of them, the smallest of the litter, seemed reluctant to leave Rex's side, climbing over his paws as if to say goodbye. Daniel smiled softly. "Seems like he's chosen his hero, too." The smallest pup was adopted by Daniel himself. It grew up under Rex's watchful eye, learning from the very dog who had saved its life. Together they became inseparable, a living reminder of survival, love, and loyalty. And so, what began as a chilling discovery beneath a moss-covered rock ended as a story of hope that touched countless hearts. Because sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms. Sometimes they walk on 4 paws, hear what humans cannot, and remind the world that even in its darkest moments, life finds a way to shine.